Hey everyone, I am Nintendo Labo, and this is Prime News. So our first story of the day actually comes from Microsoft/Xbox, believe it or not, because it may be possible one day for you to play Xbox and Microsoft-owned games on Nintendo Switch. And no, we're not just talking about Minecraft, which is everywhere. So what they are doing is creating a cloud initiative. So if that sounds familiar, it's because there's been attempts at this before. Sony does this a little bit with PlayStation Now. But what Microsoft is trying to do is essentially create the Netflix of gaming, at least for the games that they have control over. And it would be a subscription type service similar to Game Pass. It might even literally become what Game Pass is in the future and would include an ability to stream games. And the idea here is to get their games on as many platforms as possible. They want to reach all gamers. So that would include gamers on PlayStation 4, gamers on PC, of course, and naturally gamers on Switch, and really any other gaming hardware that comes out in the future, including your phones. So it's a very interesting prospect. They are not doing like a streaming service at this time, but they are working on a cloud-based system in the background, and it seems to be a major investment on Microsoft's part. They have made several acquisitions over the past handful of years that really, lead to suggest this is a thing, and then obviously Microsoft came out and talked about it a little bit because they are dedicated to this cloud-based future. Now, what does that mean for the future of Xbox? Not a whole lot right now, because according to Phil Spencer, he says, I think we'll see the full spectrum from games that run 100% in the cloud streamed to any device, to high-end games that run on highly responsive compute locally, aka Xbox, while offloading heavy latency tolerant workloads to the cloud for incredible local results. And one example they do give is Rainbow Six Siege, which currently uses their Azure cloud network for all of its online functionality. And well, Rainbow Six The Siege actually has really great online. And that's not a surprise, because there's only really a couple companies in the world that have the cloud infrastructure built up to run complicated online systems. We also know, somewhat infamously at this point, that Crackdown 3 is utilizing the cloud for extra compute, power. And I don't know how much more it needs now with Xbox One X out, but it's a thing. And to me, this is a very interesting future, because we talked about the idea of an all-digital future, but this is even a step beyond that. We're not talking about all-digital here, like Xbox Game Pass allowing you to get games digitally, day and date for cheaper. We're talking about streaming games, which again, Sony already has a service that does this, but it's not for new games because the latency isn't necessarily there. People don't necessarily have the best internet in the world. Some people deal with data caps. There's a lot of things where this isn't going to be for everyone, but if Microsoft can make it as simple as Netflix is for shows and movies, they could be onto something here, especially if they are allowed to have their application end up being on PlayStation 4 and Switch. Obviously, the big deterrent is going to be, look, they might want to be on all platforms, but if the platforms don't want them, it's not really going to matter, and it's only going to matter to Xbox and Windows users. But we'll see what happens. We have no idea when this service is planned to launch, or if they're going to give more details about it at E3. But either way, there is a potential sometime in the future that you might be able to play the new Halo game on a Switch through their streaming service, even though the game might still be better locally on Xbox One X. Who knows? They'll have to get into more details about it when the system is ready for that kind of service. Our second story for today actually deals with Nintendo Labo. Can you believe it? Nintendo Labo's back in the news. I mean, maybe that's not so surprising since it launches on April 20th. But what is really cool is they put up a new trailer, about 2.5 minutes, talking about Nintendo Labo Garage. So what is Nintendo Labo Garage? Well, it's a little bit complicated to explain, but in the most basic way that I can present it to you, it's kind of like a custom programming system you put on your Switch to interact with Joy-Cons to create end results. As they put it several times, there's an input and an output. So you input a button press, it leads to an output like Joy-Con buzzing. You do button inputs on your Joy-Con, and the output might end up becoming like an electric guitar. So you're like playing an instrument, but you're doing it electronically with your Joy-Cons. And they do several other things as well. through this, you'll be able to use 2 Nintendo Switch systems together, multiple Joy-Cons in a setup. So say you want to use the fishing rod to control the RC car, you can do that thanks to the Garage application. And there's no launch date on this. There's no if this is coming out on April 20th as well, if this is built into the Nintendo Labo software. We don't really know, but what it does do is it encourages original designs. It encourages you to use your old, they're not even out yet, old Labo kits in new ways, and obviously encourages you to use your creativity through programming. Believe it or not, this is like a really basic level of programming that to me is extremely educational for kids to learn how things kind of work in the world, where there's inputs and outputs, and tracers and all these things, connecting them. Obviously, they're not doing any real system level programming, right? You're not going in there and typing lines of code, but you are taking blocks of certain abilities like button press, here, or vibrate here, or spin here, or gyro here, or aim Joy-Con there, use the camera here to do all these different output actions that are obviously kind of limited just by your creativity and what you want to make out of it. You want to make the Ocarina of Time, you could probably do that, electronically here. It's very, very interesting what they are doing with Nintendo Labo, and this kind of shows the continued support and initiative towards Labo in general. Labo is not really a video game. So let's get this straight. When people are upset about Nintendo Labo, remember, Labo probably isn't for you. Labo is a tool. It is an educational tool. It is an art project. It is a do-it-yourself, a learning kit of sorts. So as expensive or as overpriced as you might think cardboard is, even though it comes with the software to do all this, it is still an educational tool. It is all about getting kids more active and involved in how things work, learning, in this case, learning some basic level of programming with inputs and outputs. They even have nodes in there, believe it or not. Like, if you know anything about programming languages, nodes are a thing. And who knows how advanced it gets past that and what updates they could add. But to me, this is a very good thing. It really extends the usefulness beyond it being a novelty item to being an educational item. Because we've talked in the past about how Nintendo Labo is very much that hands-on, do-it-yourself kit kind of thing, which is really, really cool for an art project kind of thing, and you could decorate it and you learn a little bit on how things work. But, you're limited by what Nintendo gives you the cardboard to do, or your own creativity in certain cases. But here, this really opens the door to other types of learning on how things work, other types of learning at a programming level. And I feel like this is really, really good to get kids into programming if they are happen to be interested. Now, I know many schools growing up are starting to require basic levels of programming classes and stuff like that. Not all schools, but some. And that's really, really good as well. But it's not necessarily as fun or as engaging as this. So seeing what programming and using your imagination, your own creations can kind of do in the real world through a physical item is actually really, really neat. And I think it's going to be a hit. I mean, I honestly, you can see this thing taking off in schools. I've talked about this before. Nintendo Labo, to me, feels purposely built to be an educational tool for schools. So I can't wait to see if I start seeing this in the schools my kids are at. Maybe we start seeing it in learning hospitals. Maybe we start seeing it in learning programs for children at foster homes. Who knows? But I am very excited to see the future of Nintendo Labo. And even if it's not for you, remember, Nintendo has plenty of games coming for us. This is for a totally different sector and a totally different way, and they're going about it the right way with all of these Nintendo Labo camps and introducing parents and teachers to it. So I'm very excited to see where this goes and what future ideas Nintendo has for Labo, because it honestly feels like there's almost no limits to what they could pull off with Labo at this point in that educational and do-it-yourself sector. Beyond, obviously, durability. We're talking about cardboard. It's not going to last forever, but you know what I mean. It looks fun. It looks great. I'm glad Nintendo's doing it. We have no idea, what the deal is Garage, if it comes with it, if it's extra, blah, blah, blah. But it's exciting nonetheless, and I can't wait to see where this goes in years ahead. So our third story today actually is about ARMS, believe it or not, because the director of ARMS, Yosuke Yabuki, wants to actually make an ARMS 2 someday. So if there was any worry about ARMS potentially getting a sequel, maybe this puts it to rest. It hasn't been greenlit, but essentially he did an interview with Famitsu magazine, and they talked about a lot of things, and in there that he was asked about, making another ARMS, and he essentially says he's really busy with the current ARMS because they are supporting it in 2018, which I don't think many of us saw, especially with the announcement late last year. We didn't really see the tournaments and the other stuff coming, but now that it has, it sounds like he really wants to work on ARMS 2 someday. I don't know if it's for Switch or for a future platform. But whatever the case may be, this is very good news because Nintendo's continuing to support the current ARMS game, and he wants to make another one. So this might become a budding franchise for Nintendo, and we could see an ARMS 2 in the future. Now, obviously, what we want to happen with the game, up to you guys. Some of you guys want more in-depth stories. Some want more characters, more ARM abilities. Whatever the case may be, you can let us know down in the comments below. I'm excited at the prospects of an ARMS 2. I know I always say that ARMS is a good game, but I haven't played a lot of it. You could say that that's counterproductive to the conversation, but honestly, the only counterproductive to me of the conversation is us not talking about how ARMS can get better in a sequel, because I think selling 1.2, 1.3 million units or whatever it is sold at this point is definitely worthy of considering making another one and seeing if it was just a one-off or if this can be a budding franchise that continues to grow in the fighting game sphere. In fact, I would love to start seeing ARMS appearing at things like EVO and other major gaming tournaments out there, but you know what, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Now, this is a rapid-fire section where we go through a few quick stories that don't need as much explanation. For starters, did you enjoy the last Nintendo Direct? Well, apparently, according to a user on Twitter, yeah, we have a screenshot here to show you. This is the full Nintendo Direct running as an ad on YouTube that you can eventually skip. Isn't that crazy? Nintendo is using a full Nintendo Direct as an ad on YouTube. Huh. Never thought I'd see the day. Maybe this is to just get that viewer count up. Maybe they want to see it hit 3, 4, 5 million or whatever the case may be. I don't know why Nintendo's doing it, but it's a thing, and who knows? Maybe some people will stick around for 30 minutes. Although I tend to see, whenever you see these really long, 5+ minute ads, I think a lot of people just skip it, even if they are interested, because if they are interested, they'll just go do research on their own and skip the ad and get to the video they want anyways. Not many people want to wait 33 minutes to get to the video they clicked on originally, but you know what? Nintendo's testing it out. We'll see what happens in the future. The next story comes from Toys R Us. I'm sure many of you guys have heard by now because it's been in the news for days. Toys R Us is closing down. They filed for bankruptcy a while ago. They were trying to get out of it as of September last year. Whatever they tried to do did not work. They are closing down hundreds of stores. They were trying to sell off, I think, 100 of them. And what's interesting here is, this is kind of what Blockbuster did when it went out of business. They kind of went out of business, but yet they sold off some stores. So technically, there's actually a handful of Blockbuster stores that still exist in the United States, believe it or not. I had a hard time believing it, if we're being honest, but it's still a thing. So it's possible there might be a couple Toys R Us stores that survive all of this. But when we talk about survive, they're going to be much lesser versions of themselves. And it's only probably going to be the absolute stores that were profitable, if there were any. A lot of employees have talked about how Toys R Us has been kind of a ghost town outside of the Christmas season. So maybe there's a Toys R Us or two somewhere that isn't a ghost town and does do good business, and those are the ones that have a chance of an investor coming and buying out the entire store and keeping it open. But in general, Toys R Us is done. They had a meeting with their employees to let them know they're shutting down all the stores. Even if the stores do get bought out and reopened, it's going to be after all the employees have already been let go, so they'll have to rehire people, and who knows, maybe they can get old managers back. But at this point, just consider Toys R Us completely dead, kind of like Blockbuster is completely dead outside of a couple locations. So that's just kind of the way it is. I don't know what you guys think about that. I don't think it's going to have any impact on Nintendo because, as people said, it's been a ghost town anyways. It's not really a place people were going to buy games or toys or really much of anything outside of the holiday sales. So you guys let me know what you think about Toys R Us shutting down. I never had a Toys R Us locally because the one that we did have locally closed their store when I was a very little kid. So Toys R Us doesn't have much memories for me, including all the Babies R Us chains. I've driven by some, never really been in one, and now I won't. The biggest thing I'll always remember is the commercial with the giraffe when I was a kid. So there is always going to be that memory rolling around my head. The last story we're going to talk about actually deals with Stardew Valley. So the creator of Stardew Valley announced on Twitter that a multiplayer update to the game is currently going through QA, quality control, basically. They're fixing up bugs or whatever. It's a solo guy, so I don't know if he has any help on the game at this point. But he's working on bug fixes and all of that. And yeah, obviously that plans to release at some point this year, I think is the hope. And we assume it's going to come to Switch, just like it should come to every other platform. And yeah, so Stardew Valley is actually one of the indie darlings out there. Kind of, sort of replaced Harvest Moon. I mean, some argue it's better than what Harvest Moon used to be. And he's not forgetting about the single player. He did note, because someone said multiplayer is great, but don't forget that it's primarily a single player game. And he said, don't worry, there's going to be new single player content coming with the multiplayer update as well. So on the multiplayer, he said, is kind of an aside. It's like this thing you can do on the side, but it's not really the main way of playing the game. Maybe it's more like Animal Crossing, where like you have all the single-player stuff, but then you can do a little multiplayer interaction. Maybe it's something like that. Visit other people's farms or whatever the case may be. I don't know, but that seems exciting to me. We don't talk about indie games enough on this channel, so you know what? This gave me an excuse to talk about an indie game I highly respect. Haven't played yet, but I have a lot of respect for it and this solo developer. Anyways, folks, I'm Nathaniel Rufflegents from Nintendo Prime, and this was Prime News. If you like this video, you know what to do, and if you dislike the video, hit that dislike button. Subscribe for more content. And you know what, folks? We'll catch you in the next one.